Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. Aren't you faithful? Everybody was so hungry after the rich and strenuous morning sessions, weren't you? And now we're about to embark on a slightly different kind of conversation. We thought we'd do this as what we call, it's like a talk show or a fireside chat, if you will. It's a little more informal. And guess what? No PowerPoint for the next hour. How does that sound? All right. You know, death by PowerPoint we always talk about, but we need our slides to guide us. But I am so very pleased that Dr. Brian Smith has come from Boston College to be with us, and our students will introduce him in a minute. But I heard him speak this spring on the topic of artificial intelligence, and I was enchanted. I really was. And he's a wonderful, wonderful colleague. But right now, joining me on the stage, Imirani Islas is a senior political science major and sociology major. And she also had a Keneen Fellowship this summer as well. Good for you, Imirani. And then Binta Diakate is a junior psychology major with a minor in Africana Studies. So good for you, Binta. And Quaresma Gilliard is a sophomore global affairs major with a minor in foreign policy, diplomacy, and security. And she's also a Shannon Scholar, which is also wonderful. These are all some of our great scholars here. So, Imirani, you're going to introduce Dr. Smith. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. So, Brian K. Smith is the Honorable David S. Nelson Professor and Associate Dean for Research at the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. His research interests include the design of computer-based learning environments, human-computer interaction, design sciences, out-of-school learning, and computer science education. Earlier, he served as Senior Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at Drexel University's College of Computing and Informatics, and as Program Director in the Division of Research on Learning at the National Science Foundation. He has degrees from UCLA and Northwestern University. I will now ask the first question to kick off our chat. Dr. Smith, you have focused your research on the human impact of computers and technology. Why did you choose to focus on this area of research and teaching, and how has your philosophy changed over the years as technological tools have evolved? How has the advent of artificial intelligence changed your thinking about this topic?
Hot mic. Okay, hi. Thank you so much for the question and for the invitation, President McGuire. Thank you all for joining us today. So let me try to answer your question the best I can. I started as an undergraduate, actually, truth told, I started as a mechanical engineer, and that was too hard. And so one day I saw this problem. It was a bridge, and it said, find the force at point X, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. So I went up to the engineering office, and I said, which engineering does not take this particular class with this bridge that I have to solve this problem for? And the person said, chemical engineering doesn't take that class. And I said, some of you might be chemistry majors. I couldn't do that either. So I said, no, that's not a possibility. And she said, computer electrical engineering is the other degree that does not take that. And I was like, how hard could that be? Now it turns out, like 4 in the morning in like these computer labs, I realized it's a little bit harder than I thought. But I did find my passion in computer science, and particularly in artificial intelligence. So I wrote my first AI program was a game. It was actually an African game called Mancala. Some of you probably know that game, and it was to make a computer representation of that, have an artificial intelligence opponent, and that was kind of my intro. And as soon as I did that, once I got the thing good enough that it kept beating me, then I thought maybe this isn't a good idea. But that was my first intro into artificial intelligence. I then had the luck to work on a few different jobs. Now, I'll say, I only usually say the dates. So that was 1988, probably. I then had a couple of great internships where I know healthcare is coming up soon, so I did work with UCLA Radiology doing computer vision. We were looking for tumors, and so trying to do computer vision, trying to look for where are tumors in the head so that you can get surgeons that information and they can make better surgical decisions. And that was around 1991. In fact, we would find the volume of the tumor, and we gave it to another machine that then would cut a physical model, which you now think about as 3D printing, but this again was 1991, 1992. So my point in saying that is a lot of this technology has been around for a long time. In fact, we've talked several times today, we've talked about AI being really the sort of genesis of that, that term is around, is 1955. It was a proposal for the conference at Dartmouth, written by 4 individuals. One of those guys, John McCarthy, was the one who coined the term artificial intelligence. I would say the human side. I had an assignment, I was working a part-time job at one point. I was with Rand Corporation in Los Angeles. And I was working on a project. It was trying to do military logistics. We were using artificial intelligence techniques at the time. And at one point, this general came in, and this guy said, okay, all the great work you guys are doing on this team, we're now going to assign you to something called Desert Shield. Now, some of you in the room may remember that there was a shield before the storm. Anyway, I was a little bit freaked out about, wait a minute, I was just here trying to do part-time work. And now, Desert Shield was the build-up to an invasion, the United States going into a war with Iraq. Across the hall, there were some guys, and these guys were working on something that was called an intelligent tutoring system. And some of you may have heard that term, but these are systems that, a computer software that tries to help people. It emulates sort of a teacher in some ways, right? And these guys were working on basically geometry systems. So you would try to solve geometry problems, and if you were making a mistake, the computer system, the artificial intelligence system, would then try to diagnose that and say, hey, let me give you some feedback about how you could do that better. So I'm looking at the 2 sides of the hall. I got the war machine over here, and I had education on this side, and I thought, I think I know where the choice is going to go. And that was my first exposure to AI in education, and that's where my interests ended up. And so I went to graduate school and kind of continued to pursue that, and that's why I sit in a I sit in an education school. Right now, I have been in computer science departments. I had this one weird job. I was the dean of continuing education at Rhode Island School of Design at some point in my life. And so all that is to say that I don't like disciplinary silos. And so, because I think that some of the most interesting problems are when you can really bring people together across those silos. And so but also a very humanistic kind of place in thinking about what can art and design bring to the world. I'll say that. Okay, so you asked another question, though. You said, sort of can you repeat? There was a why on earth am I doing this? And then there was.
Yes. How has your philosophy changed over the years as technological tools have evolved?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm glad, yeah. So, starting out as a computer scientist, my initial thought was that they're computer science problems, they're technical problems. And in fact, we have at Boston College now, we just started something called human-centered engineering. We have a new department, and it's a human-centered engineering. So I asked these guys when I went there, I said, what does it mean to be a human-centered engineer? Now, we're all trying to figure this out, but I said when I was trained as an engineer, human-centered meant something like this. They said, in an electrical engineering class, they said, don't electrocute humans, right? That was human-centeredness when I went to school. So people are now thinking about this much deeper in terms of what are the things that you can do? How do engineers, how do scientists, how do computer scientists actually contribute to society and think responsibly about the kinds of decisions that they make when they're designing new tools, new technologies. So I think the biggest transition for me, having worked in the field for a long time, was at some point I worked at this, I had another job at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I was a junior faculty member there. Everything was about, at the MIT Media Lab, we were all about technology. And we were thinking, though, about the humanistic aspects of it. And that was where I really started to learn and to appreciate that there are no technical problems, right? Now, part of that was because we were at MIT, so we were kind of cocky. We were like, we could build anything, right? We can build anything, right? And I, in a way, I still think that's true. The hard part are the cultural problems and the social problems and the economic problems and the political problems and the things that people have been talking about so far. And so I gained a real appreciation for that it's not the technical stuff that really matters. It's really how does it get situated. I mean, we heard earlier, how do businesses really approach these kinds of things? What are the value propositions? What do they think is good for their customers or clients, right? What are we thinking about when we're in the classroom using these kinds of technologies? How can they support students and actually make sure that at the same time we're avoiding any risks or biases? So those are the interesting questions. I mean, and I came to learn that after many years just building things, and particularly in working in education, where it became very obvious that that's the primary concern is really about people versus the machine.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Thank you for your response to that question, those questions. It was very informative. I like how you integrated so many different things that wouldn't be directly connected to computer science and incorporated into your philosophy. That was very interesting to learn about and hear. But bringing it back to Trinity, in recent campus surveys at Trinity, about half of the students and faculty and staff expressed concerns about the negative impacts of artificial intelligence. But at the same time, many also said that AI might help them. So how do we, as an academic community, balance the awareness of the risks while also learning how to use the AI tools effectively to improve learning and teaching and just day-to-day things on campus?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's not just Trinity Washington, of course, right? That since this started November 30th, 2022, as ChatGPT was released, by mid-December, you started to read a lot of things about, wow, this is great. Actually, the best part was this. Probably by second, third week of December, it was clear, like, kids are cheating with this thing. Everybody's cheating. By the time you got to January, right, the New York School District had said, we're going to ban the use of ChatGPT because of all of the bad things that can happen. Now, the interesting thing, and I always ask this question, is how much cheating could occur when all the kids were on Christmas break? And that's when all of this happened, right? But just the enthusiasm, the fear, I have a folder on my browser, and I record things to it that I see. It's called bad news. And I don't mean bad news like, uh-oh, it's the end of the world. I mean bad news like really bad journalism. Really bad journal that has been just ineffective science communications that has said, right, it's like, oh, education's doomed, and I just keep those gems, right? And I've talked to some reporters and said, like, you gotta stop that, right? We have to report these things realistic and actually be, to take a neutral stance on, at least to say, what is the unbiased way? It's like, these things, they have risks, sure. They have benefits, sure, but at least try to portray that in ways that don't, it's not, how do they say, clickbait. I think the one thing I've said to educators, certainly at universities, is I've said, and I don't know if you have an equivalent of this here, a lot of universities have what they'll call like a Center for Teaching Excellence, an online center, maybe some kind of innovation in teaching, centers like that. My first thought is go to those people. Those people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what do we do with any kind of new technology, how do we integrate these things. So again, we've seen this as President McGuire said earlier, right? Calculator came, I loved how you said it was the devil's right? Calculator came, everyone was afraid of it. Wikipedia came, the internet came, and so here too, is another thing. And the people in those teaching excellence units are working hard with faculty to try to figure out what are the best ways to approach this. So I certainly rely on those people a lot, and try to work with them in terms of trying to understand. So what does this mean for education in the classroom? The second thing I tell people is I stay true to your guns, right? Certainly those of us who are faculty, we do this for a reason, right? And so the teaching mission of any university is the first priority. When I hear people saying, do we need to incorporate AI in our classroom? I say, only if you feel the need to do that. I mean, it's not necessarily that you would have to do that, but if you feel that there's some need to do that, and certainly I think there's reasons to now try to put in, I see more universities saying, we have to at least figure out what are the policies, how are we going to guide faculty members and students, I think both of them, about what are the values that we care about in the classroom, and what are the things we need to put in syllabi that would say, you can use ChatGPT for these things, you should not use. I have a friend, and he basically says, you can come to my class, you can do anything you want with ChatGPT for yourself, I don't care. And then when you take my final, man, you better not have used ChatGPT for everything. So that is one way to do it. And I can tell you, I talked to his students, and they went, yeah, that guy don't play. So we clearly have to do this work ourselves. And we can use that as an assistant. But I think people are starting to get much better with this, that whatever those initial fears were, I think that, you know, due to, yeah, actually, the other part I say to faculty at universities, talk to each other. Talk to each other. Because I find, at least in my university career, I would make a class, and these people would make a class, and we would never talk about what we were doing in the classroom. Why? I don't know. It was never like a bad, like we weren't penalized, or it wasn't that we were trying to hog it. It was just that the time to talk about these things aren't necessarily always there. And so that's why I actually say the most important thing to me about ChatGPT, because I said there's no technical problems, the most important thing about this thing, chatbot, sometimes I call it, I'm just like, you know, it's not that, okay, I'm going to say it's not that interesting to me as a thing. What is interesting to me is that it's generated all of this conversation. And I've seen more educators talking about what do we do, not with it necessarily, but how do we think about our pedagogy? How do we think about our assessment? How do we think about what we want our students to do and value in the world? I've heard more conversation about that because of you know, the robot. And so I think that's the great benefit to me. And I hope that those conversations continue in ways that maybe they didn't, because there was this pandemic a few years ago. So when people say this one too, this is another funny one. ChatGPT is going to change education. I was like, a global pandemic shut down education, completely shut down education for a number of years, and we're basically back to normal. Basically back to normal. So if it couldn't change education, ain't no way. Ain't no way a robot's going to do it. Ain't no way. So I think the thing that does is it's us. We change the ways that we approach these things, right? There is an inevitability argument that goes out there too that says these kinds of technologies inevitably will change the way. No, they will not, because machines don't change anything. We change them in the ways that we act and we react to them. And so, again, when people say, someone asked me, like, you know, what's the most exciting thing you think about ChatGPT? When you think ChatGPT, what excites you? And I was like, nothing. Nothing excites me about a piece of software. One, because I'm not going to say that I could have made it, because I don't have the computing power. It's so I will be fair to say it's an incredible technical effort. And the progress we've seen in this area of generative AI in this past year is really, my computer science hat on, I'm going like, wow. I guess I thought we would be somewhere like this, but I didn't know that it would be within this speed, this particular period, that short amount of time. But I prefer to look at things to say, what impresses me is when I see how faculty, teachers, students actually use these tools. So it's understanding that all of these tools they're embedded in a social context, and a political context, and a cultural context, right? So when I get excited is I see a political science instructor, and he says to his class, he says, okay, let's get ChatGPT to write an essay. What do you guys think about it? And the students look at it and they go, that essay's perfect. We would give that essay an A. And the faculty member says, you know what, there's no citations. That's going to be an F. That's going to be an F. Now we're going to back off, and we're going to try to figure out what it means to what do we need to value about a political science argument. And we're going to come from that. We're going to look at this critically. What does ChatGPT leave out? How could we improve it? Because it's unlikely that it would be able to do that. But I think people using it effectively in these ways to say, like, you know, it's not perfect. Let's actually sort of like do a judo move, right? We sort of go, okay, we'll account for that. We'll take that and we'll use that as a way to, again, have our students really reflect on what it means to be a good writer, a good software engineer, a good mathematician, whatever the field happens to be.
Thank you for that response. As a student here right now, AI and ChatGPT has been a conversation that me and my peers have been having, and it's very interesting to learn about that. But the question I have for you is, at Trinity, we are very concerned about racial, gender, and social equity. Some critics are saying that artificial intelligence perpetuates a lot of racial biases, and this may occur because baseline data and algorithms are taken from predominantly white experiences. Now, if we choose to embrace AI as a part of our technological future, how can we guard against these inherent biases and ensure an equitable development and application of the tool?
Yeah, it's a fabulous, hard question. So you know, I remember early on when this thing came around and people started looking at it, someone asked a similar, the question was, are there ways that you can get ChatGPT and similar things to actually, I guess it was posed as, how can it adopt the values that we as a society care about? How can we get it to say good things and not bad and things, and not have biases and things? And unfortunately, my answer was like, well, you know, ChatGPT was trained on an enormous amount of data. I mean, more data than we could possibly, like, there's just no way to think about how much this thing ingested, call it reading. Anyway, I said, you know, whatever it is, I said that it's ingested all of this text, but we created the text. And so the problem is actually not that the machine, I mean, yes, it is displaying bias, but the biases came from all of the text that we gave it. At that point, I said to this reporter, I said, so in that case, right, what humans would have to do if we were going to train this is we got to stop murdering people, we got to stop being racist, we got to stop being sexist, we got to stop, like, we should just be better people, right? Which is, you know, again, the mission here, the mission in Boston College, we should just be better people. And then I said, I said, so don't hate the chatbot, hate the game. Yeah, that's good. My kid was just like, are you serious? Like, this is the stuff, why do people even talk to you about this stuff? But I mean, your point is well taken, right? It's a great point, right? We have data sets that are biased in certain ways. Now, I think the way, I guess, to sort of deal with that is you know, I'm at a university, I'm a university professor, so I'm going to say education, right, is certainly one way. And I think it means trying to figure out how to educate the next generation of computer scientists, data scientists. And then I'm going to go even further, because I'm going to say, you know, the number of people who have to be software engineers in the world are actually fairly small compared to the number of people, everyone in this room, who will use data and who will end up using some sort of AI system in the near future. Well, you've already been using them, right? That's the thing. In fact, when there was a big uproar about this and people said, hey, what are we going to do? There's AI now. I went, look, how about Grammarly? How many of you use Grammarly? Nobody was scared of Grammarly. Grammarly was just like everybody's best friend. Grammarly was just kind of it's the thing, and it's kind of, you know, it sort of helps us. Now, it doesn't, obviously at that point, it didn't generate text, which is a far scarier thing in a classroom. But again, that kind of these technologies were there. So it wasn't much of a leap from, can I spell check, to can I do really sort of adaptive editing with Grammarly, to now a generator like ChatGPT or Grammarly Go, right? Because now Grammarly does have their own, actually everybody's got a generator. Like, it's sort of amazing. I was on Zoom the other day and it said, would you like your AI assistant to help you? I was like, what would it do? On Zoom? There's chat bots, and like everybody's got Spotify, it's got a chat bot. I swear I can just go to my Roomba and go, would you like to chat now, little guy? You know, I don't know, everybody's thinking, it's the cool kid thing, put a chat bot in everything. And so I think what we have to do is actually start to really be deliberate in educating people across fields, because whether you're in business, whether you're in chemistry, whether you're in the arts, whether you, as my friends in Hollywood certainly noticed, they went, oh, it's going to hit us too, right? And understanding what do we need to know about when we talk about data, what do we need to think about in terms of fairness and accountability and trust, what are the kinds of bias, and acknowledging that those biases exist, because there are people who would say, you know, you could say, well, there is racial bias in some of these algorithms, and some people might say, yeah, but that's okay. you know, how many people will that hurt, right? And so we have to have a sense of like the potential harm, the potential risks are there. How do we start to educate people again to, when they're building these systems, to understand what kind of data do they have? What are the implications of those data? How do you make smart analyses of those data and present those in the world, right? So that you can minimize the amount of harm. Yeah.
All right, now it's on again. You know, some of us should learn to use the handheld mics, right? So, Dr. Smith, when you and I chatted much earlier, one of the things we talked about is the particular role of Catholic colleges in thinking about the ethical issues around technology and artificial intelligence. And, you know, I've been thinking about that question because I'm hard-pressed to think of a Catholic university in the country that's known as a tech powerhouse. You know, usually when people talk about tech, they talk about MIT and you know, Carnegie Mellon and some others, but they rarely talk about the Catholic institutions. Is this a topic where maybe there should be some rethinking among the Catholic institutions of how could we bring that ethical sensibility, especially the Jesuit schools, Boston College, and the SND schools, Trinity College, okay? What do you think about that? Tell me, can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, you know, so there was a recent meeting sometime this year, and it's SACRU, it's something that's somebody's, I'm never good with acronyms, but Catholic Research Universities. And it's a group of institutions around the world, not a lot of them, but Boston College is one of them, but there's a few of these universities convened, and they actually met in Italy. And then when I tried to get my ticket from Boston College, I was like, hey, can I go too? And they were like, no, there's a Zoom link. You can just go on the Zoom link. I said, no. All these other people get to go to Italy. Can I just have it? I'm like, no, it's Zoom. You'll enjoy it. It'll be great. While they're all eating lunch in Italy, you can sit with your Boston College sandwich. Anyway, this group got together to think essentially about that. Like, what are the things that we as Catholic universities should be trying to understand about this technology? And I would say the things that really came out of it were very clear. One, it was interesting that when we talked about artificial intelligence, it was very clear that that group kind of said, it seems to be a moving target. What is this thing, right? And there's actually a history, it's sort of well known in the field of artificial intelligence, that when something looks like it's solved, then you move the needle and you go, well, that's not an artificial intelligence problem anymore. All right, so you may remember when the chess playing machines, right? So once, Deep Blue got good enough and it was like consistently beating people, then it was like, well, that's not an AI problem anymore. And it was like, well, it was 20 minutes ago, but no, now we've solved it, right? And the Jeopardy machine and things like that. So it's a constantly moving target. And so that was one of the first things we went, it's kind of hard to even talk about something that's constantly shifting, never mind evolving as it goes. But I would say there are also the other part that we really did talk about was like, what are those things that we value? So certainly in Boston College, we talk a lot about formation, about formative education, about educating the whole person, about really thinking about not just the intellectual and the social, but also the spiritual dimensions of people. And we have this thing where we ask a lot, we ask these questions. Oh, in fact, here, I brought the manual. Now, I'm sure it's not called the manual. It's basically just the red book. This is Boston College. We give this out. They give this to the freshmen coming in. They give this to new faculty. Everyone reads this manual. It's not a manual, but I read it because it talks a lot about what do we care about as Jesuits, in particular in Jesuit education. And there are these three questions that we talk about a lot. What gives you joy? Are you good at those things? And does anyone need you to do those things? And we think a lot about that in terms of our education and what we see in the classroom and how we talk about what's the importance of the liberal arts as well as finance, if you're doing that kind of thing, if you're doing computer science. I did ask ChatGPT, by the way. I said, Chat, that's what I call it. Chat, what gives you joy? And I could read it from here, but it basically said, well, I don't really have joy. I'm a chatbot, Brian. I don't really know what you're talking about. Like, there's no joy here. So and it said, I am an information machine. I give back information. So I said, are you good at that? And it said, yeah, I'm actually pretty good at that. I mean, people seem to use me. Then I said, does anyone need you to do these things? And it gave me a very long bulleted list of ways to use ChatGPT that it's good at. And by the way, it tends to give bulleted lists. Does anyone notice that? Oh, it loves its bullet points. Somebody read a little bit too many PowerPoints, I think. Loves its bullet, and very confident with those bullet points. I've got this. I'm ChatGPT, right? Just the fact that it couldn't answer those questions made me, is one of those things where you go, like, because it's not a human. And because those are the things that we really value. So I think certainly at Boston College, as we've had conversations about this, we keep coming back to, you know what, if the first concern was what happens if people cheat with this in the classroom, then we got to think about why would they cheat in the first place, because certainly it was the case that it wasn't that OpenAI invented cheating, right? People cheated people were cheating beforehand. So the question becomes, why are they cheating? What is it about the context of our classrooms that would drive people to cheat, as opposed to driving them towards, I really care about learning, I really care about enriching my experience, I really care about, right? So those are the things I think that we've been trying to really think about. Right? And I think, thank you so much. So I think those are the things, right, that Catholic institutions bring to the table, right, is that we think deeply about these things, not to say that other universities don't. I mean, I've worked at a number of different institutions, and certainly, I mean, they're all thinking about this problem, but I do think that there's something very unique and special about the Catholic educational experience that, where these things are at the forefront. I'll say one more thing. Like a friend of mine, he's at Concordia, Montreal. He's the director of their Center for Teaching Excellence, John Paul Fox. And so John Paul and I were doing something last week, and he made this great thing. I hadn't thought about this, right? This is why, I also borrow from lots of people. So he said, if you think about academic integrity, what do we really care about? And he mentioned some work that was about the values, things about the values around academic integrity that are about respect and honor and trust. And then he said, people sometimes, they confuse academic integrity with academic misconduct, which is two very different things, right? So we can say misconduct, we would like to have people who don't cheat and don't, that we want them to cite their sources, we want them to things like that. And when they don't, there's a misconduct thing. But the integrity piece, the piece about actually making sure that students understand the values that are part of being, academic or just an ethical person, and enforcing those in the classroom, I think is something, again, that is a huge role we can play in guiding also how we think about these things. One other thing, I think what we also need to do, because you said we're not technical powerhouses, and you're right, I have been told this, is trying to get a seat at the table, right? Because in fact, many of these artificial intelligence systems now will be driven by corporations. And it's simply because the compute power on these things to generate a model the size of GPT-4, there's probably a 15 that's coming. Wait, yep, there it is. I think it just dropped because the change is so fast. Like everybody's got a new model all the time, right? And those models, whether it's Google or Meta right, they take an enormous amount of effort to build, and we're not at that table when those things are getting built. So the question of something like, how would ChatGPT change education? It would do it by fluke, right? It would do it because, some good educators figured out what to do with it. It is not doing it because it was designed to do that kind of work. And I think it was maybe should make sure I get my stuff right. Dr. Greer mentioned design earlier, and when you said that, I thought, like, that is something that's hard to take away from us, right? And it is, like, by being that's the other part of your question too, is how do we sort of eliminate some of these biases? By design, right? If we think, right, if we're conscious about our design, we design with people as opposed to for people. If we do those kinds of great design work, right, we will hopefully minimize bias, hopefully get better outcomes with some of these systems. So I think there's another place where how do we get to the table to talk with these, to collaborate with these companies to say, hey, if you're thinking about this, we have needs as educators. Can you help us do that? And perhaps they would, because but I don't think, it was certainly not, I just can't imagine anyone at OpenAI initially thought like, wow, this is going to be great for education. That was certainly not the goal. And later on, it just happened, again, educators started to see like, what if, right? And so how can we be at that table to help design the next level of tools, I think is an important thing too.
It's such a wonderful answer, and we're going to take one or two questions from the audience, but before that, since you just teed up a shameless commercial break for Trinity, when you talk about the seats at the table, and I see my colleagues, Dean Sita Ramamurthy sitting down here, who made seats at the table happen for Trinity. So when Amazon came to town a few years back, they called meetings with all of the major universities in town, and guess who was not invited? Trinity. And I raised Cain, and I met with some of the business leaders, and I say, why aren't we at that table? And they said, oh, well, we looked at your website, and you don't have a computer science major, so you don't count. No, I mean, that was really the truth, right? And I said, well, we have mathematics, we have logic, we have all the things you need in your workforce. It's just not called that. And they said, well, come back to us when you have something. So Dean Ramamurthy, who is our famous mathematician and Dean of Arts and Science, who will speak next, I sent her out to change the dynamic, and she did. And she met with the Greater Washington Partnership, the Capital Co-Lab. We created a data analytics program that turned to be immensely popular, not just with math majors, but with political scientists and sociologists and biologists. Everybody needs data analytics. And suddenly we got invited to the tables. And one of my points was, if our students at Trinity, the African American, Latina women of Trinity, are not at the table, what are we doing? And what are those tech companies doing as well? So being at the table is extremely important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. You know, I mean, it's worth saying that, you know, that some of the people who have pointed out most of the interesting biases and injustice around data and, you know, looking at sort of where the biases, where are issues about race or gender or something like that, they are women or LGBTQ, they are people of color. They are a very diverse group of people who are looking at this. They're the pioneers in looking at and understanding, hey, these data sets, these facial recognition algorithms can do a lot of harm. These kinds of things can also do a lot of harm. And so I think it's only because of the diversity that's at that particular, that's looking at that area, that suddenly I think that's when the field really kind of went, uh-oh. Like, this is far worse than when we thought. And those biases, I can't remember who said it earlier, they've been there forever. I mean, I saw facial recognition systems, in the 2000s, where they clearly could not recognize female faces as well as they could. They were trained on MIT graduate students.
There you go.
So there were certain things they could not really recognize as humans. And I'll leave it to your imagination. I'll leave that. So I see.
All right, one or two questions from the floor. Anybody want to ask a question, jump into this conversation? Oh, everybody's being very quiet right now. Yes, well, Hani. Here. Hani is creating our information technology.
Hello, everyone. So I just want you to think about something. Okay, right now the question is not should we do it. The question is how we do it. How we do it properly to improve the lives of everyone, not in computer science, not in information technology. The technology wheel will keep moving forward. We started with the steams, cars. Today we have cars that they drive themselves. We started with the steam trains. Today we have bullet trains. AI is here to stay. AI is here to improve our lives. The problem with that is, and this is what I always teach my students, especially into a level information technology and computer science studies. The first question I will ask them is to open your cell phone if you have an iPhone and go to the battery and tell me how is your average use every day. And guess what? I will rarely find anyone who uses below 5 hours a day. Now, the way you use this device defines you. You're either a follower or a leader on the way you're using this device. And this is exactly what's going to happen with AI. Okay? Think of it as your co-pilot, how it's going to make your life easier once you start implementing it. In medical, in education, everywhere. Think of it how to become your co-pilot, not the pilot. And there is another exercise I always do to my students. I will ask them to write 2 papers, research, and give it to me the next day. The next day, I will tell you what, 90% will not do it. They will go to ChatGPT or Google Brad, get the research, then I'm gonna ask them, okay, tell me what it's about and explain it to me. So that's the difference. Learn of how to use it properly as your co-pilot. And there's an article coming about that. Thank you.
All right. Other questions? I think everybody's ready for a switch. Dr. Smith, it's been wonderful to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.